In the mid-19th century, Rome existed as a magnificent, decaying web of history, standing in defiant, silent contrast to the soot-stained industrial giants of the north. While London surged forward as a mechanical titan of iron and coal smoke, and Paris reinvented itself with grand, sweeping boulevards, Rome remained asleep, anchored firmly within the embrace of its glorious, crumbling and moss-covered past. It was not merely the heart of Italy, but a vast, living, open-air museum where poets, dreamers, and pilgrims from across the globe gathered to witness the remains of a lost world. To walk its streets in the 1850s was to move through a labyrinth where the grandest monuments of antiquity were inextricably woven into the humble, often chaotic, daily lives of the Roman populace. The air carried a unique, heavy scent, a mixture of dry incense wafting from the open doors of 1,000 churches, roasting chestnuts from street-side braziers, and the earthy dampness of the Tiber River. The streets were paved with sampietrini, small basalt stones worn smooth by centuries of sandals and carriage wheels, while narrow alleys were tangled with laundry lines stretched between medieval windows. This was a city where the majestic and the mundane collided. The social hierarchy was visible in its geography, from the fortress-like palazzos of the black nobility who claimed lineage from the Caesars, to the crowded, vibrant Popolani districts like Trastevere and Monte. Life began with the dawn tolling of the Campanone bell at St. Peter's, a deep, resonant sound that rolled over the 7 hills and signaled the start of a rhythm dictated by faith rather than the factory whistle. Men headed to dark, stone taverns for a breakfast of crusty bread and watered-down wine, while women gathered at the city's many public fountains. These fountains, such as the massive Trevi or the 4 rivers in Piazza Navona, were the city's lifeblood, where gossip was traded as much as water, and the constant splashing provided a ghostly soundtrack to the morning chores. In the marketplaces of Campo de Fiori, farmers from the surrounding Campagna brought carts laden with artichokes, grapes, and olives, their massive gray oxen standing patiently amidst the ruins of ancient temples, their horns sometimes touching the very marble that had once adorned the house of an emperor. This was the era of the Grand Tour, where wealthy travelers from Russia, England, and America arrived in dusty, heavy carriages, their trunks filled with guidebooks and journals, eager to soak up the melancholy grandeur of a city that felt like it was slowly dissolving into the earth. Near the Piazza di Spagna, a colony of international artists, sculptors, and poets flourished, creating a cosmopolitan bubble where the languages of the world mingled with the local Romanesco dialect. Local peasants from the Sabine Hills, dressed in their finest traditional costumes, white linen chemises, and red velvet bodices, sat on the Spanish steps, waiting to be hired as models for paintings that romanticized the rustic Roman life. Perhaps most striking to the 19th century visitor was the total lack of separation between the people and the ruins. The Roman Forum, known then as the Campo Vaccino or cow pasture, was not a fenced-off archaeological site, but a working field where cattle and sheep grazed peacefully around the half-buried arch of Septimius Severus and the massive, leaning columns of the Temple of Saturn. These ruins were not yet excavated. They were submerged in centuries of accumulated debris, with only their upper portions visible like the masts of sunken ships. Inside the Colosseum, the scene was even more surreal and haunting. The massive arena was overgrown with over 400 species of rare wildflowers and vines, creating a lush, green interior that felt like a botanical garden within a fortress. Small workshops, stables for donkeys, and even humble dwellings were built directly into the ancient blood-stained stone arches, their chimneys poking out of the Flavian brickwork. The city was a bewildering labyrinth of winding alleys where the laundry of the poor crisscrossed above the heads of passing cardinals in their gilded, velvet-lined carriages, creating a sky made of linen and lace. As the evening fell and the sun set behind the Janiculum Hill, casting long, dramatic shadows that seemed to stretch back into the classical age. Rome transformed into a place of deep, velvet shadows. Gaslighting was a latecomer to this city of popes. For most of the century, the only light came from loomy small oil lamps placed before street-side icons of the Virgin Mary, known as Madonnelle. These shrines provided a flickering spiritual glow that barely touched the darkness of the narrow side streets, which became the territory of the Bulla Street toughs and mysterious secret societies like the Carbonari. The nocturnal silence was broken only by the ghostly splash of the city's many fountains, echoing through empty, moonlit plazas like the voices of the distant past. Nighttime Rome felt like a city belonging to ghosts, where every footstep on the worn basalt paving stones seemed to echo the movements of emperors and popes long since past. Even as the 1800s drew to a close and Italy unified in 1870, making Rome its capital, the city remained a place where the present felt like a mere temporary visitor in an eternal landscape of stone. The people lived in a state of povertà dignitosa, or dignified poverty, where the grandeur of their surroundings contrasted sharply with the simplicity of their meals, usually consisting of pasta e ceci, or a simple piece of pecorino cheese shared in the shade of a ruined portico. The Tiber River, though untamed and prone to devastating floods that frequently turned the Pantheon into a reflection pool, provided the only relief during the suffocating, humid heat of the Roman summer, its waters carrying the silt of the mountains through the heart of the empire. Beneath the surface, the city held even darker secrets, with the sprawling network of catacombs and ancient sewers like the Cloaca Maxima still functioning as they had for over 2,000 years, carrying the waste of the 19th century through the tunnels of the ancients. Rome was a city of vertical layers, where a medieval church was built atop a Roman temple, which in turn sat upon an Iron Age hut, and the people of the 1800s were simply the latest generation to navigate this immense vertical history. It was a place where a high-ranking cardinal might step out of a Baroque palace only to trip over a stone carved during the reign of Augustus, and where the shout of a fish merchant in the ghetto was just as significant as the solemn Latin prayer echoing through the nave of St. Peter's Basilica. Everything in Rome was absorbed into the eternal sun-baked stone, creating a city that felt less like a place and more like a state of mind, a reminder that while empires fall and centuries pass, the stones of Rome remain, watching the world move feverishly into a future they have already seen.